Mental toughness is portrayed in the media, and certainly across all social media outlets, as a grit your teeth, push through, show the world you never back down approach. Now, while that may garner plenty of clicks and make the creator feel good about themselves, it's not actually mental toughness. Today's episode will introduce you to some practical examples of the real deal in the form of an unscripted live recording of an actual coaching session. You'll meet Chris, a high performer who's looking to enhance his outcomes further in his personal life, and Sabryna, a nationally board certified coach who has also earned her specialty certification in mental toughness and resilience. Welcome to the Catalyst 360 podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brad Cooper of Catalyst Coaching, and I'm particularly excited about what's about to follow here in our 335th episode. It's a longer episode than usual, as we want to give you the full experience of not only the coaching session, but also a debrief that Sabryna and I will do after the session wraps up. That last section is specifically designed for coaches that may be listening who might be curious about how she was implementing some of those functional mental toughness and resilience specialty concepts. Now, if you're an employer and you'd like to explore offering coaching to your team members with coaches that truly are specialized in this and aren't making it up, details on that are available under our Catalyst Elite program at catalystcoaching360.com. And if you're a coach who's looking to add the specialty certification in this area, please visit our institute site, catalystcoachinginstitute.com. And of course, either one, feel free to contact us directly anytime. Email is results@catalystcoaching360.com. And now it's time to listen in on a real live coaching session on the latest episode of the Catalyst 360 podcast.
I think it's been almost a month. So hopefully you've had some time to test out the things that we talked about last time. I am curious as to what you thought your wins were. Let's start there.
All right. I like your thinking, Sabryna. That's a great place to start. Yeah. So I think it was a good window of time to test some of the challenges that I've been dealing with, specifically around scheduling. How do I remain consistent? If I'm here at home for a week or two and then I'm on the road for a week or two. And it was it's been one of those months. I just wrapped up some travel and so I've been out of town for a few weeks, 2 out of the 4 almost. So in terms of some wins, I think one thing you said, many things that you said stuck with me, but one in particular was this idea of mental toughness. And strangely enough, I think I took that as a challenge internally. So nice. I think I grabbed a hold of that. And as I prepared for my first trip, I went through the process, almost a mental checklist, and said, what would I need to do for this to look better? And what is better? And I realized that it was much more effort to actually kind of achieve the outcome I wanted, but I did it. It was but it was very hard. And I thought, this is why I need mental toughness, more of it with this kind of situation where, it's just a different set of variables I'm dealing with out of town.
Okay. So that's good. I don't know if we really talked about the whole kind of idea of the functional mental toughness, but the center of the piece is like, there's a bank. We consider a bank in the middle, functional mental toughness. And so we're trying to make sure we're making deposits into the bank, right? But there are many times in life where we withdraw, and I'm guessing like travel is like, ooh, travel like seeps or takes, you're doing withdrawals from the bank. And the things that I don't think I explained it to you, the 3 elements that kind of feed into the bank are thrive, prepare, and activate. And so thrive is all those foundational things that we talked about, those catalyst cornerstones, move, feel, rest, connect. And I felt like you have a really good foundation of those things, right? And you're working on fuel. And I think really what we were talking about last time was more things like prepare, like when you're away, how can I prepare myself better? Right.
Agree.
And then activate is kind of like, I'm standing in front of the buffet. What do I do now?
Right.
And so I was thinking about it since we talked. So prepare was kind of like your systems. that we were talking about, trying to figure out which systems would work for you best. And then activate was kind of when we were talking about when you are standing in front of that buffet, what can you do in the moment? And we had landed on kind of thinking about who do I want to be, right? Like, what's my identity again, that I'm a healthy person,
right?
You know, for myself and my kids. And so I just wanted to share that with you before we go into today, because you had been thinking about functional mental toughness. Right. And what I'm hearing you say is that you're kind of affirming that the travel is challenging.
Agree. And I think I don't always assess the level of challenge maybe appropriately. I think that's the other part of this is I tend to give myself maybe more credit than I deserve with being prepared. Because in what I would describe as, my home turf, I can manage things pretty well.
They go smoothly.
They go smoothly. Exactly. And I think in this case, what I really keyed into is even my travel isn't normal travel. It's like really early departure and shuttles. And like, it's a pretty intense version of travel that I've had to back into and say, okay, let's be fair to myself here and realize this is going to take extra preparation, extra effort. So
like you are going to have to tap into the bank. I mean, you really are. It's so different from your normal life, your life at home.
That's it. And I think when, I dulled or at times mute that kind of reflective mode where I'm tracking on these things. And so I think the narrative I can hear in my head when I'm in the midst of those, events, those week-long events, or is, you'll make it back or you'll make it up. Like, in other words, don't worry about the decision you make now. Like next week, you'll make it up. And I think that's the other theme that really started to emerge over this last month is this feeling of yo-yoing a lot. Like I'm drawing from the bank, I'm putting in the bank, and it's
so you don't really like the oscillations.
No.
And I'm hearing you say that you're finding yourself justifying maybe
exactly
while traveling, and then as you reflect back on it, when you're not traveling, you're like, wait, did I really, really want to do that?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Okay.
The continuities.
So it's interesting because you mentioned that you felt like it sounds like you had much higher awareness.
For sure.
That's a win of what you were feeling and what was happening. So what did you learn that would maybe make you want to change anything that we talked about?
Well, I think first off, the first meeting, coaching session we had, just to thank you, was very helpful because I think you encouraged and provoked me to think more deeply about what's going on, in the day to day.
Sure.
And I think another theme or maybe idea that you shared was related to identity. So I thought about that quite a bit more, and also keyed into like what signals am I getting from my environment that maybe I'm not filtering or I need to think more deeply about. And one thing that really struck me this month was, and hopefully those of my friends, if anyone's listening who knows me, they don't feel judged or implicated here. But, as I would talk about some of the things, some of the activities I have coming up and would invite friends in particular, almost, I would say 90% of my friend, like this month said, I'm too old to do that. Like I can't do that. And I think that
struck a chord.
It really struck a chord because I thought, wait a second here. I'm just turned 54. I don't feel that old. And by no means am I going to not do these things. But that really had me thinking, like, what does that mean for some of, my friends and people in my environment who are almost like
they're working against you a little bit with those kind of statements.
I want to be careful because my goal is to actually convince someone to join me with these things, but I think being realistic about that these, a lot of these habits and decisions start with some identity, an identity dynamic, like who do you think you are and what do you want to do and what are your limits and all those things. So it was very interesting. I'm
hearing you say you didn't like it when perhaps your environment was telling you your identity was limited or kind of putting a cap.
For sure. For sure.
on your identity.
Absolutely. For sure.
That's good. So I hear you also say that you take things as a challenge. Like what? That's not my identity. I'm not too old.
Right. And I think we talked about this the last, meeting, that living in Colorado, I think, helps counter that, because almost any season, any time, you can go somewhere and you will see people in their 70s and 80s, climbing the mountains, skiing with you. I mean, it's a blessing, I think, to be exposed to that on a regular basis. So that
it's
helps.
Inspiring.
It is. It's really inspiring. Yeah.
It's also evidence that
that's it.
Right? Evidence that you're not too old to do these things.
Right.
Okay. So the identity idea really was important for you.
It was.
And so what did you do with that? The fact that it was so important.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, to what end does that matter then? And I think twofold, for me anyways. I think one was, it brought me back to something you shared again last session, which is, my biggest goal is to be the dad or the parent, who can keep up with his kids, as long as possible. And so that's the first thing, is that really, really resonates with me. And with these activities also really matters to me. Like this summer, my dad, who's 81, he convinced me to go with him to Alaska to go fish, bringing my oldest son. And I'm like, I think he's fine at 81 to, stomp around in rivers and all these. But I thought, but that's the example I've also grown up with, which is, which I appreciate quite a bit. And again, that assumes you're physically able, and he still is. And so anyways, that really kind of connected these two worlds for me. Why would I want to be that parent? Well, it's because that's what I'm still seeing, and it really is wonderful for me.
Yeah. You actually get to physically see that in your life.
Yeah, right.
A model of it. That is very interesting. So we had originally talked about that identity thing to help you, I think, in the moment of making a decision on your food choices, your fueling choices. Right.
And that does help. I think there's so much richness in the literature and the science. And I'm a novice in a lot of this, but this idea of it's not just longevity. We're after quality of life. And I think because you can tell so many of my important memories and relationships are, embedded in outdoor activity, and, why I live where I do, and why I spend a lot of my time doing what I do. It just matters so much to me, and keeps everything, moving forward. So identity wise, to your question, I'm so much more aware that, the day-to-day decisions,
choices,
exactly, feed into that longer term trajectory, where will I be health wise? And Achilles tendonitis was the exclamation point on that, where it's it's like a regular reminder to me of good decisions.
Yeah. So that you found very, very helpful. Do you recall a moment in where you were faced with a choice and remembering the identity helped you?
Absolutely. My last, probably a few weeks ago, when I traveled for work, there were just regular moments where I was like, this is what I normally do. I would have this, I would do these things. I would stay up late. I would eat this food. And I thought, but I want to go back home and keep the continuity with the investment in health, really. So I feel better. And I did. And I got back and this was hard, but it also feels really good. So yeah.
I love it when you say it was hard, but it was good. I did it. Yeah. And it's interesting because it's hard now, but I'm imagining, did you feel like the more you do it, the less hard it will be? Because you are training your brain. This is part of that mental toughness.
Right. I think so. It's been it's probably, no, and I know so actually. I think part of it, as I mentioned last time, is seasonal for me too. Not to make an excuse, but I think it's a factor. Easier. It's just easier for me. Yeah. in the non-winter seasons.
Sure, that does make sense. But it is so funny because I was thinking about you saying that this is hard. It's hard. You have to stop and think. You have to remember the identity, and so that process is hard. Right. But it's interesting because you've trained for events.
Right.
I would guess that that's hard.
For sure. Absolutely.
And then the result is like, what's the result of your training for, for the actual moment, the event?
Such a good way of framing that, because I don't think of my life as an event, like a race or something.
Sure.
But it could, I probably should think more about it that way, because it's kind
of like you're training. I hear what I think of. This is interesting. What I think is I'm like, you're training for longevity, Chris. Right. Like that's almost what you are telling me.
Right. Yeah, and yes, absolutely. And you can tell I'm quick to add to that quality of life, meaning like, being mobile, having mobility and all the things. I mean, I think we can all as a country too, just, reflect more on this idea of how do decisions we make relative to our health even affect our later mental health? Like the rates of dementia are so high now. And so I just think, I think particularly in your 50s, like where I'm at, it's a really important time to say, like, what do these decisions mean to me later on? Say, you just can't buffer. I can't buffer the things I maybe used to do.
No, right. No, we don't have that. We don't have that extra space. It's funny because I don't know if you've listened to the podcast that Brad has done, but I think he interviewed somebody that talked about health span versus life span. And that's kind of what I'm hearing you're realizing now, right?
Right.
Is you're trying to influence positively your health span.
That's so well put. Yeah.
The health of your life as you progress into age.
That's it. That's it.
Okay. So the healthy identity was good. It was hard, but it was good. How did your systems go? Like, what did you learn about you? I think, what did you learn about your system?
Yeah, I think, again, strengths sometimes become our weaknesses. I tend to be a pretty good planner.
Okay.
And at the same time, I really realized I need to have like this executive meeting with myself the night before each day and go back to like, that kind of atomic habit thinking, which is like keep the day, the unit of measurement, like really work in a day. Meaning like, what are the things just being consistent with scheduling. Because sometimes I can think at a week or a month, and then I start to things drop out of my daily schedule. That may sound strange, but that's sometimes because I think too far into the future. I'm not grounded enough in the day. So
sure.
Yeah, more aware of that.
So interesting that you say that, because one of the actions under prepare, kind of preparing yourself, which is what you're doing when you're talking about systems, is reflection. Yeah. And what I'm hearing you say is it's important to just think about today. Think about what's happened, how you felt, to help you do better just tomorrow. Right.
That's it.
Okay. So you didn't even know that is something you are putting stuff into your mental toughness bank. Good job, Chris.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I think there's different types of reflection.
Yeah.
And I consider you a pretty reflective person. Like, I feel like you are good. You have an awareness that it's important to reflect. But what I'm hearing you say is that it's the quality of the reflection that's important, and perhaps the regularity or the consistency.
That's it. That's it. And maybe the third part of that is that I just say I'm an extrovert in that I want to be around people all the time. And so I think like it's hard for me to say, this is a walk I'm going to go on, or time I'm going to spend alone, and I'm really going to create the time I need. So I think that's the other thing I'm having to really control for, is being alone more often, because that's typically when the magic happens and I can start to hear my own voice.
Interesting. That's interesting too, because perhaps in the past, what I'm thinking is, okay, you mentioned you're extroverted and you like the stimulation of others around you, but that could theoretically interfere sometimes with your internal motivations, like to tap back into, to remember the things that are important to you.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
And so now you're like, oh, wait, okay. I need to have some moments with myself to remember, to recall.
That's it. Yeah.
So did you come up with any system for that, for reflection?
Yeah. This has been like more than 30 years. My secret weapon is just taking walks, sometimes jogging, but I'm just getting back into that after the injury. But yeah, like walks are really good for me. So if I can get like 2 in a week alone, that's usually enough. Like that's pretty good for me.
So that's a good time for you. What would you do? Like, what would you, would you be intentional with your reflections during that time? Because I mean, I can think of walking and doing a lot of other things with inside my brain.
I hear you. Yeah, for sure. I would say, almost all the time, yes, it's successful, but it takes 20, 30 minutes until I'm really kind of attuned again. So it needs to be a longer walk, an hour to 2 hours. So maybe a hike is even better.
Okay, that makes sense. So give yourself some space to do some frivolous thinking.
Right.
As well as more intentional, purposeful reflection.
That's it. That's it.
Okay. Okay, so we've talked. This is good. We've talked about all the things that you've learned and that you think are going well. What were some of the pain points or things that are still feel challenging, if any?
Yeah, no, for sure. There are some. And I mentioned one, which is this like, it's almost like a mental reverse mortgage, which is like, I can do this thing today because I'll make it up tomorrow. And it has a diminishing return thing, for me. So I'm getting like, it just doesn't feel like the right way to think about some of the things I'm doing. So that's the first thing, is trying to not be in that kind of yo-yo where it's like, okay, I just, took this amount of equity out and now I have to put this, like, so being
right. And you're wondering like, okay, I took that, I withdrew that.
Yeah.
Right. And I wonder how, like what kind of effect that withdrawal is having, like that, taking that out. Right.
Yeah.
Is having.
Yeah.
So one of the things I heard you say was that the whole idea of it's okay, I'll catch up later. Right. Or I'll do better tomorrow. Or which in some ways is you don't want to go around with like a bunch of negative thinking, which is why I think you do that, right? Like I think it's a way of not sitting and making yourself anxious.
Right.
Based on your choices. But on the other hand, you're like, well, why do I have to be in that yo-yo? Why do I have to do that to begin with?
That's it. Yeah. And I mean, so that would be one area. And then, very quickly, the other, I think, is just being committed to that, like, to being a lifelong learner in some of these areas that it can feel like you've, whether it's nutrition or, the Achilles tendonitis or tendinopathy that I'm dealing with, it can feel like at times, like I want to be done learning, like I've read a lot or whatever, but I'm realizing in some of these areas, it's kind of a never-ending commitment. Like it's, my conditions needs change. The information that's out there, the science is, evolving and changing. Meaning like in some of these areas, I'm reminding myself I need to commit to, nothing crazy, but just staying connected to learning more. Just continuing to be open-minded and learning more.
So you're wanting to balance the energy that you are putting into learning. That's it. Okay. So it's interesting because you're thinking, I keep thinking you keep thinking, I'm going to learn this and going to be done, but that's not really,
no,
that's not really how you figure it out. that's not really how it works.
That's right.
But I also am hearing, or I'm guessing, I think that there is a lot of information out there, and sometimes it's hard to discern what to do with it.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Okay. So you've got two things you would like to do better with. Mental reverse market. I love that reverse market. And just feeling better about the learning process, like how much energy you're putting into it.
That's it.
Okay. Let's talk about the mental reverse mortgage, because it seems like to me you have a lot of really good systems. You have the identity thing. You said you've tried to plan, tried to reflect day to day. So when you're in that moment, so this goes into that activate. So you're in the moment, and all of a sudden you make a choice that's not in alignment with your identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's happened?
Yeah, I think for the most part, almost in, the first thing is if it's helpful, I don't really feel guilt or so that's the first thing that may be good or bad. I think it's good, but so I cut myself quite a bit of slack, knowing that in many cases, like the worst outcome can be self-guilt or just losing your own agency or belief, or support. So I don't feel that. That'd be the first thing. I think what I do feel though is like in the past, I can make this up by doing, whatever the following, running more, being active. And I didn't have Achilles tendinopathy. So like that, so I didn't have a marker somewhere that said like, there's something that could happen if you don't, address some of these health issues. And that was overuse. I think that's why that surfaced. So I think my reaction oftentimes is kind of nothing really. It's more like, this made me feel good. I'm tired. I'm anxious. I'm going to bed late, or I'm eating something I shouldn't. And so, I think it's more like I feel better now. And then that's about it. I don't really.
So it's really, so what I'm hearing is you go for the short-term gain.
That's it. Mm-hmm.
And you put aside the long-term identity.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. What do you want to do? Like, I think it makes a difference of like how impactful is that short-term decision to your long-term identity. I think that's what I'm hearing you say you struggle with.
Yeah. And that's kind of the bedrock, I think, of the dynamic, which is like the relationship between my long-term outcomes or goals and those decisions. They're becoming more and more like connected, like one informs the other, they're much more highly correlated. And because my travel, like I said, can be intense, I think I can really, and not to say travel is the only challenging context, but it's a big one. And I've probably been traveling for work for, I don't know, almost 20 years off
forever.
Yeah. So it's, so sometimes these are like kind of deeply ingrained habits, I think for me, like that, when I was 20 years younger, like this is just the way
right. You've been doing this, so you keep doing it.
That's it.
So that's curious. So I'm wondering if in those moments of those choices, is there another choice? Yeah,
for sure. And I think that's where the last session we had helped me think about that in terms of the preparation. What would it take to be reflective enough so that before that decision's made, I'm thinking about what's the consequence, how does that matter more broadly?
So I'll throw something out there, if it's okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking in the moment, it's hard. Like you've said multiple times, right. Your brain wants to do the old way because that's the easiest thing. Our brains just want to save energy, and they're like, hey man, we've been doing this for 20 years. Why can't we just keep doing this?
Yeah.
This is really hard. So to counteract that, we're thinking, yes, you want to think about it differently beforehand, but it's also perhaps building a new habit like a new choice of things to do in that moment.
Right.
And to be able to practice the new thing. So kind of like the replacement habit.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so if I'm trying to imagine, like, if you're sitting there and you're like, man, it's just fine to I'm tired and I want to eat a cookie.
Right.
Well, so I'm just throwing that out. Like, what else could the other thing be besides eat the cookie?
Right.
Perhaps that's a way to kind of counteract the old habit and the old neural pathway, is to focus on building a new one.
Right.
So that it is more of an automation, and you start to automate something else. You automate the healthier choice.
That's so good. Yeah, for sure. And I think what I can add to that is something I'm becoming more aware of too, which is when I'm on the road, I'm typically engaged in, I would say, higher stakes meetings or activities, meaning I'm on like almost the whole time. And so the food choices I make often are also influencing my energy level and kind of how I'm showing up. So like, that's another thing I'm like really keying into.
That's good to remember, Chris. That's really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm thinking cookies are great for about 10 seconds. I mean, theoretically, that's what the science says.
Right.
I'm thinking things like protein or hydration would be perhaps better for your energy in those moments. What has your research told you?
For sure. What you just said and what protein satiates me as well, has that effect. Yeah. Energy that's being, calories that are being processed over. Yeah. All of the things that go back to healthy food choices. And I would say I'm able to do that most of the time when I'm not in a meeting or in an airport, like when I'm in my own controlled environment, that's where things often go awry.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think just being.
Have you traveled with things like cheese sticks and nuts? This is just, I'm thinking about, what have other people done? What have you done?
I do that. Yeah. I have like similar things. I think that works in kind of pockets of the trip. It's more, I'm in so many meetings where there's food all over the place.
Oh, it's the environment.
And then it feels like a social dynamic. Like it would be strange for me to open my backpack, pass on the table, or
what would be strange about that? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think, part of it is because the first thing I'm thinking is this food is free. And it looks really good.
Okay.
And I'm going to be, sitting.
Is there a food scarcity situation that I don't know about with you?
It's probably me being, cheap.
So it goes back to something like some of that stuff is like cultural. Like you had mentioned struggles with that briefly in the last session, right? Like some of those interesting thoughts.
Yeah.
So the food is free. So if the donut is free, should I eat it? What do you think? Does that go along with your? How does that work with your identity?
Right. Well, ironically, I did bring a box of donuts last trip to a meeting, and
that is pretty ironic.
I know, and right. Yeah. So I think just I had one.
You didn't bring a box of nuts?
I did not bring a box of nuts. No, I'm gonna run out of there.
Well, so I'm hearing you. Wait, I am hearing you say there is this. You are feeling a conflict in how people would perceive you.
Maybe it feels more like ease. I guess it's a good point. So maybe I need to work through that idea of what would it look like if I just brought some healthy food and, or we were out to dinner or drinks and, and I got the water or the seltzer, in other words, I've been around people who do that and I never respond negative. I'm more in kind of.
So you didn't say, hey, what are you doing? Just ordering water.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe I need to try to be that person who just.
Well, this is a really good conversation, Chris, because I feel like it goes back to you are feeling a pain point. And I'm like, but that identity you talked about.
Sure.
What behaviors match the identity?
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And so you said you've seen people that make these choices. You don't think less of that.
No. Yeah.
I mean, does that help to realize that? What do you think about that thought?
I think I need to give that, like, I need to own that thought, because I think I've just looked at it as a, I like this is just amazing that this person can do that. But yeah, like logistically, it shouldn't be that hard to do. I think it's just, maybe that's like next level for me with some of these.
Maybe it might be, because I'm curious. I'm like, who do you want to be? Do you want to be, do you want to stay the yo-yo person? Right. Or do you want to be the person that doesn't even think about yo-yoing, using the yo-yo? Right.
Yeah. For sure, it's the latter. Yeah. And I think, this is such a good discussion for me too, because I think you can tell in some of these areas, I think I've just let them be. When the dynamic happens, I'm like, this is just how it's always been. So, Yes.
I love that you described that, though. You did a good job of describing, like, here I am, I'm in these meetings with all these people. Yeah. Like, why would I choose differently than they're choosing? And I'm saying, why wouldn't you choose differently than they're choosing?
Right. No, it's such a good, yes. Yeah. I really need to give this some internal work, because, okay.
So maybe that's a next step. Like, we're trying to think of like actions. And so the action I'm hearing you say is reflect or process that identity. What would you call it?
You mean like the kind of person who makes that type of decision regularly?
Yeah, like what would you call this action that you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like next level, habit forming in this area. Like, and so identity wise, it just goes back to that, like, healthy dad, like healthy, I mean, it's for sure.
So you would start thinking healthy dad identity. What choice does he make in the boardroom? Or whatever the room. I don't know why I keep having that picture in my head.
No, it's okay. There were a few of those.
Okay.
This one. Yeah.
So healthy dad identity, what choice would he make in that environment?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So that's what you kind of want to chew on.
Yeah. And to your point too, this is also like it's been very helpful. The few people in my life who are that person, like who I've watched them do what I just described.
Okay.
That helps me a lot. Like I can actually, in a way,
think about that person. So you're saying, imagine that person that helps you.
That's it.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
They're really, because when I've had time around a few people who, kind of live in that kind of more consistent way in this area. And it does encourage me. I think I've just never.
Okay. So that helps with your motivation.
It
right?
does. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any things that you can automate or to work on the next habit? Like, what would the next habit be? Is it choosing something else? I'm trying to think, like, what would it look like to you?
Good question. I think I know. When I mentioned I'm in a more controlled environment, at least half of the month, not 3/4.
Sure.
You can typically like pick my meals throughout the whole week. And I'm normally pretty good. So I think like before I go on a trip, like you were kind of inferring, I could probably just say, here's exactly what I'm going to eat, from day 1 to day 4. And I would probably be mostly successful with that. So
plan or imagine or decide ahead of time.
That's it. Yeah.
Because it is, as you've said before, it's going to be hard when you're in the room full of people that are choosing differently.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Right.
And it's interesting too, because when you were saying how you had your friends telling you, well, you can't do that. You're this age, but it's almost, it's similar to that, because you're having to bump up against other people's ideas.
Sure.
And stay true to your own. Right? So I'm imagining you've done this in the past. I'm just imagining. So when have you done something like that where you've been in an environment and you've kind of had to stand up for your principles that were different than the group's?
Oh boy. Yeah, I think, I would say even just with, I guess I'd say work for sure. I mean, there are lots of times where I have to make a decision or I have a perspective, and it may not be a popular one or one that people agree with, or, everyone agrees with. So I think just.
And how did you stand? Like, how did you stand your ground?
Wow. Okay. I mean, I would say my last position, there were some areas of disagreement that were so strong that at some point it was a matter of, really speaking to leadership above me and saying, like, I have enough conviction about these issues or these areas that, like, I can't support organization was so I will leave, within as soon as I can get another job, because I can't support this culture, for instance.
Okay.
And I did, and so I think, for sure how'd you say it? If I care about something enough, I'll dig in.
Okay.
And at the same time, look for intervention or improvement or progress.
Sure. I mean, it's not just a black and white decision. You'll still look for mutual ground or something. For sure.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So so you have this in you. And so what I'm hearing you say then with this whole healthy dad identity, it's you're working towards it being your new normal.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
Right. So it is interesting because the way our brains are, the more you make the hard decision, you are creating that neural pathway. Like every time you make the different choice, that gets you closer to your new normal. Does that help to know that? Like that is why it's so hard, because if you're imagining the old pathway that you've chosen for 20 years as being like a deep crevice, and you're like, you're kind of like breaking ground. You're like trying to do the healthy dad identity, but it's not a deep crevice yet.
Yeah.
It's kind of a dusty path that still has branches across it.
Yeah.
Does that help you to realize that it is going to be hard?
No, for sure. And, probably the best example I can think of that's, related to this kind of almost like training mentality is when I was training for a marathon and then running triathlons, like I had to really reorder a lot of the way I thought about things. And identity was like the center piece of all of that, where it was like every day I had to say, okay, I'm like, I can do this thing and here's what it's going to look like. And then there was, this future date where all of that kind of preparation or training, really, came to fruition. But I think, I think it's very similar to what I'm trying to do here, which is
it's so similar. Yeah. I think what makes it slightly harder. So we are talking about mental toughness and like the physical toughness. It made sense, right? You put in the training hours and you get stronger. But it also the event thing helped, right? Like there was a tangible end that you were working towards. And here we're like, well, we're talking healthy dad. Well, like, when is that healthy dad? Like when, is it today? Is it 5 years from now? Is it 10 years from now? It gets a little foggy, right? So it makes it a little harder. However, it's up to you to put that in your head as, wait, no, that's my thing.
Right.
That's what I'm training for.
That's it. And you really have to make it your thing. That's such a good way of putting it. Like you can't have 5 things that are all equal importance. Yeah, with some of the decisions that are like crucial to being successful. Right.
Like, do you want to be the guy that brought the donuts? Or do you, I'm going to tease you about that one.
Yeah, I know,
or do you want to be the guy that, I don't know, brought the cheese sticks? I have no idea.
Yeah, fair question. Fair question. Yeah. Yeah.
What would that, if you imagine the two different people, the two different Chris's, the Chris that brought the donuts and the Chris that brought the cheese platter.
Right. Right.
I mean, what do you think about those two different Chris's?
Yeah, I think this is kind of the disconnect that I have to work through for, my first reaction, which is those two people are going to have a harder time coexisting into the future. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a good thing, because right now they're the same person.
Right.
The same person, right?
Right.
And it's almost like I'm challenging you to say, that's the Chris of 20 years past.
Yeah.
I'm talking, I'm thinking about the Chris that just told me all these things, and where he wants to be 20 years from now, like his dad going fishing in Alaska at 81.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see if we can come up with some tangible action points of your way forward. Make sure you're filling your mental toughness bank.
Yeah. I think the things we spoke about. So, having a plan, making sure it's a near term, long term, like there's, it's informing the day of or the day before. I think identity. So keep continuing to do some of the identity work around, who do I really want to be? Like, what is the marathon race look like that is, going to take some changes in my day-to-day behavior, and focusing mostly on the positive, or maybe entirely on the like what are the great things that then come from that?
Yes, that's good.
So that's, I think, and then the other thing I put is I was thinking about our prior to this discussion was, making sure that I pull in a few friends, to just really kind of support me with not just being a friend, but, maybe helping me think about like a 6-month plan, checking in with me a bit, basically encouragement and some accountability. And that's always helped in the past when I'm willing to do that, I guess.
So you want to share your goals, kind of like, I want to be this person. This is my identity. These are the choices I want to make. And you're my friends.
Yeah. Keep me on.
Help me with the guardrails here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that is smart thinking, because you talked so much about environment being important to your success, that you do kind of you have to surround yourself. And Brad, he's a big proponent of that. Surround yourself, those 5 people that are closest to you, who they are and what the choices that they make matter. They influence you. So that is a great action point. Okay. So having a plan, continuing to think about your identity, but really the long term. It's not the same person 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's it.
And then why? I'm hearing you say, and then focus on why. Like, why do I want to be that person? Because there's all these great things that will happen.
Yeah, that's it.
Like, anything else that you can think of? If I talk to you in a year, Chris, what will your identity be?
Yeah, I think yeah, I mean, you kind of, you hit on what's, I think, necessary, to get to that place where like I own that identity. And I think some of it is that like that conviction, like this is important enough. And then, I don't know the right term, but also like, how then do you, kind of have enough ownership of that to, I'll just say it, to, really go kind of move upstream, in other words, to like resist those things or issues or people who are really, fighting for the opposite, which is,
resist the challenges in the environment.
Exactly.
Because they always will be there. I mean, that's life.
Exactly. And maybe even turning that into, okay, I I appreciate you and your input, but that's just not me or who I want to be.
Yes. So that goes back to feeling the conviction, like being able to say, this is me. That's okay. It is okay for someone to be whoever they want to be.
That's it. And I think I'm really like super blessed in that way with friends because I tend to like a definition of a friend is someone who sees the person you can be, rather than like constantly holds you accountable for the person you are right now. Like they're right, they want the better version of you and they're investing in that in a friendship. And I think like this is a great example of when I'm saying I'll reach out to friends, I know my friends
they want you to be the best version of yourself also.
Exactly.
Yes.
What I do for them, so I think that's a pretty cool part of this exercise for me that like in a year I could see, maybe a few friends and I have tried to help each other in this way. So I think that's another thing I'd love to imagine in a year from now, if I can make that happen.
Good. All right. Just going to have to check in with you then for a year from now so that I see the evolved Chris.
That would be great.
Well, Sabryna, thanks for doing this. I just want to do a debrief a little bit so you can give some of the folks listening a chance to hear what's going on in your brain. What did you feel? What did you hear? What did you think of afterward? That kind of stuff. So maybe that's a good place to start. What might you have tweaked as you thought back over it and kind of did your own debrief in your head?
Yeah, it was really interesting because this will be different for coaches because they might be using these concepts on somebody that they've been coaching.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was a little tricky because it was really a first session with this client.
Yeah.
So I had a bunch of things in my head that were related to this is a first session with your client and you want to learn a little bit about the client. So I was probably more hesitant to dive right in there to tap into using the fMT elements. And so I think what I did more so is I foundationally was thinking about the cornerstones because I think I used the cornerstones a lot of time to just assess, assess where the client is with his life, in each of the four cornerstones. And so I leaned on that a lot more than I might with somebody if I've been coaching them for a while. Okay. So that was a little bit different. And because it was a first session, I had to do that learning. And again, actually the cornerstones were great because it provided a foundation to learn about the client. And so that was actually very helpful. And as I got to talk to the client, I realized that he had one of the cornerstones that he wanted to focus on, which was feeling. And that as he talked, when he said, this is what I want to work on, it rang a bell like, oh, well, he's kind of in action stage with his feeling choices and behaviors, but it's these certain times that challenge him. And those times are like events in my brain when it comes to the fMT,
That's excellent.
And so I was like, okay, so these times in his life when he travels and it's an issue for him, that's when his fMT is actually getting drained. And so it seemed almost natural to be thinking, oh, well, then we should be thinking about prepare. And then when he's actually in the moment, we should be thinking about activate. And so in that first session, I feel like I spent kind of a lot of time thinking with that mindset. And he came up with great goals that were related to fMT because it was kind of making sure that he wanted to come up with structures and processes, which to me is a lot of the automation, like let's work on strategic automation. And then he was trying to think of what would motivate him in the moment. And I think that came back a lot to his why. So he needed to have a strong identity, a healthy identity. And then in the moment, thinking about his future self. So it was really cool to me how it kind of played into the different elements of fMT.
Well, and I love what you brought up there because I think this could be incredibly valuable to coaches out there of couching things as an event. I think a lot of times we fall into a mindset of, well, it's not a race. It's not a, hiking thing. It's not a final exam, but almost anything can be couched into that event piece. And then you can build through the model on that. So I love how you describe that. You're using this a lot out of the gate now with all sorts of clients. What are you learning as you continue to integrate it a little bit more? Because initially you're like, okay, I get the concepts, but not using a lot. And then started using it more. And then you were kind enough to do a sample session or two for us. What are you learning as you progress through this journey over several months?
A big one is, and this is a big one, is the fact that the concept that seems to be the easiest for clients to relate to is the fMT bank. And so that wasn't obvious to me when I was coaching this client that is, has the recorded sessions. It wasn't obvious to me in the first session, but then in the second session, I decided to bring up I decided to offer the whole concept, and I mentioned the bank, and right away the client kind of laughed and said something about, oh my gosh, yeah, when I travel, it's like a reverse mortgage. And besides being really funny, it just was interesting to me that right away the client got it. Like, okay, yeah, I do all these things. I work on my cornerstones, he does all the time. And then when he does the event, which is really just travel, all of a sudden it's like, withdraw. Even though he's deposited in his daily life at home, he's made the deposits. And so that made it so much easier to talk about, okay, so then when you're getting ready to travel, which to me is prepare, and then when you're traveling, what can we do so that you don't have that leakage? And honestly, with some of the things, if you are visualizing your future self, you're actually depositing into your fMT bank. So I've really realized that I coached this client and I've been using this concept now pretty regularly. It's pretty funny. And so starting kind of describing the bank makes things easier.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing that in, because I think as the instructor through these modules, that's something as I look back that I would have liked to emphasize even more. So this is a great time for the folks listening to this to really put a stamp on that. And folks, use that as your anchor. If you get stuck, go back to the bank. If you're not sure where to go next, go to the bank. If your client doesn't totally get it, go to the bank. Like that is that idea of fill it up, limit the leakage, and be able to access it when you need it are such core elements that will make sense to any of your clients. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the ones, and you've heard me talk about this with some of our other team members, that is, when in doubt, go to the bank. I mean, that is because then that will lead you into the other pieces. They can
see it. They can really see it. They understand. Everybody goes to the bank. Yeah. Everybody makes deposits, right, and everybody makes withdrawals. And so to the client, they're like, oh yeah.
Right. And that leads you naturally into the other options then of, okay, so with that bank, do we want to focus on thrive? Do we want to do more prepare? Do we want to do more activate? And then that's because I think a lot of times, I don't know if you experience this, but it's easy to get overwhelmed as the coach because you have 37 options. And instead of trying to think, oh my gosh, which of the 37? It's like bank leads me to one. Okay, now I'm in thrive. What am I hearing? Oh, it's this. Let's lean in here. So yeah, that's awesome. Anything else that kind of, as you've been using it more, you've realized, oh, I really like this part seems to matter more with executives, this part more with athletes. Have you seen any of those kind of patterns, or even in yourself as you've been applying these things?
Well, of course, I have to laugh because, of course, with myself, I noticed I was on the bike the other day and suffering a bit, going uphill for the first time in months. And I was thinking, what did I learn in Activate? Because I'm right here, I'm on the bike, and I'm kind of suffering. And I remembered segmenting. And so I literally was like, well, just get to the next crack in the road. Yeah. Okay, you got there. Okay, just get to the next crack in the road. Right. And totally helped me. Got through like 8 cracks, and I was at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
So just that, I think that's really funny that yes, I myself used it, activate in the moment, totally helped, got up the hill. But I think with my clients, what I'm noticing is it really sets up a nice way actually to talk about thrive more. Like they realize that the foundational habits really are what they have control of and really are a big part of bank deposits, like huge. You know, you need to have that first. You need to have some money in the bank. Right? Like, so I'm thinking about clients they're thinking, oh, I've got to prepare for this busy time of year. And I'm thinking, well, yes, you have to prepare, but we got to go back to the four, catalyst cornerstones.
Exactly. Well, and it gives credibility to something that a lot of your high performers are just like, yeah, whatever. It's like, yeah, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Yeah, I don't have time to get a good lunch.
Right. And I'm like, you're not going to be able to get to prepare.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to be any good at prepare.
Right.
And then in the event, if we are not focused on right now in thrive in your catalyst cornerstones. Yep. So and it's interesting. The concept is so simple. Like another tip, I have the concept, like the printout, the handout, print it out on my, just print it out and I look at it, because in my head, then when I'm explaining it, it's so simple. But when I coach in person, it's also really simple. It's just simple.
Yeah, exactly. It's something you can draw out on a napkin form. And they'll get it and they'll remember it. And yeah. So, okay. So have you seen that? It sounds like you have, where maybe some of your folks that are blowing off some of those elements of eating well, sleep, relationships in the midst of stress, all that kind of stuff. They're going, oh, if I don't do that, I'm basically blowing up 30 to 45% of my mental toughness. And I want that mental toughness. Oh, okay, Sabryna. Now I'm in.
Yeah, it's really interesting. What I want to share with everybody is the more you use the terminology, now I can't stop using it. It's probably, I don't know if anybody thinks it's annoying, but it's like my brain is processing everything through fMTc certification. But it's allowing me, I've had people that are so focused on their work performance, and I'm coaching them. And now all of a sudden I'm getting to talk to them. They're receptive to the thrive. They're receptive to the cornerstones where they never were before. Right. But because I explained the bank and I'm like, well, you got to start with some money in the bank. Yeah. Otherwise, when you get to work and you're spending, I'm like, you got no more cash. What now? There's nothing.
Yeah.
We got to go back. We got to go back and fill the bank. And so that to me is what's very interesting, is that they're finally like, oh, so what happens outside of work does matter.
Yes.
So for me, it's huge, because it's, for quite a few of my clients, it's allowing me to have them refocus on their foundational habits.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. All right, so two other things I want to touch on, and then anything else that comes to mind. But we've got some coaches who are relatively new in their coaching career that have pursued this specialty certification. What advice would you have for them as they're frankly mixing this in with all of their new knowledge on MI or stages of change or whatever else? Any advice for the newer coach who is so excited and motivated, and they jumped right into this and they're adding this to their toolbox, and yet there's so much. Any advice for that individual? And then we'll spin off into the experienced coach that's been doing this for years and is adding this into their rhythm. But I'll come back to that one. How about the new coach to start with?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Brad. And, it's so funny. There's this metaphor that's often used with coaching, and it's described as a dance. It's a dance because there's two people, and you're both partners. And the interesting thing about that is when you're a new coach, you're focused on all the you're focused on the steps, you're focused on the learning, and it's like super clunky because you're just focused on all these things that are so new. And so I would say for the newer coach is to, get the information through the certification, really understand the fundamentals, really understand the bank and, how that relates to thrive and prepare and activate, like just the foundational things, and perhaps just get comfortable with a way themselves to describe it. Like, how would you describe this to somebody in 20 seconds or less, right? So just foundational. And then start to offer the elements and strategies that make the most sense to them, to that new coach at the time. Right. And again, I would say, thinking about the bank, just from experience, like that seems to be the easiest thing that clients grasp onto. So perhaps as a coach, start there.
Perfect.
And just remember that it's going to be clunky because you're just learning the dance.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So then the experienced coach, person's been doing this 2, 3, 10, 15 years. And they stumbled across this specialty certification and they're excited to add it, but they also have the rhythm and things are going well and they're getting good feedback from their clients and they're getting good outcomes. And now they have this kind of new thing to add in. And I'm kind of sort of describing you. You've been doing this for 18 years. Yeah. How are you taking this new tool and adding it to something that's already working really well?
So part of that I would say is the same thing, like kind of think about the concepts that ring true to them to start with, right? And again, get your little nice elevator speech. Think about, okay, how am I going to offer this to clients? And then I say, have fun. Have fun learning the new dance. Okay. Have fun. And I would say challenge yourself to notice the different ways that clients that you're already coaching might be able to benefit from individual fMT concepts. Like just challenge yourself, just think about your clients and go, oh yeah, that one, we've been talking about this. I wonder if I brought up fMT, like what they would be keying into. And so it's kind of like, it's really funny. What's that thing when you're focused on looking for red and then all of a sudden everything is red? I'm challenging the coach to be like, I'm like, look through the fMT lens.
Yeah.
Your clients through that lens and really get excited and have fun and perhaps see the different ways and just test out like different concepts. Again, for me, it's just so fun to look at all of my clients through a slightly different fMT lens and to go ahead and offer the different elements when I think it's appropriate for each individual client. So, and I'm going to say the fun thing, the fun and funny thing is the more I use it, the more it just becomes such an easy way to talk to clients about increasing their mental toughness. And I feel like, everybody these days, almost everybody I talk to wants to increase their mental toughness, again, not just for the climb up the hill like me, but like for everything, for work, for your relationships. So I just say for those coaches who've been around, just have fun with looking through coaching through this lens.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, that's the end of my questions. Anything else that you think would be helpful to throw out to folks as they're kind of putting this all together now? They're basically done with the training and they're starting to integrate it into what they're doing on a daily basis?
I would actually say one thing that I have found great is I took copious notes when I went through the certification. I mean, I took great notes. And so it's almost like week to week, I kind of do a reflection time on my clients and what did I use and how did I do with them? And I've also looked back at my notes because it's funny, like for whatever reason, certain things stood out to me at first. Then I look back at my notes and I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't really been talking to people about the AMCC, or I haven't been talking about callousing, but that's really, that could have been really useful with this client earlier this week. And so I would suggest to people, go back and revisit your notes. And what's really fun is I actually went back because we have the video. I love that we have access to the videos, because I have also gone back and listened actually to just certain elements. Like I listened back to the description on describing like resilience, mental toughness, and then grit, because it refreshes everything. And you just can't learn every detail the first time around.
Absolutely.
So that would be the other thing that I would say to new coaches or seasoned coaches is don't forget, like, you can go back and look at all your information. There's no way that you absorbed it all the first time around. Exactly. So I would just encourage everybody, go back and re-listen to certain things. You're going to notice things that you didn't notice first time around.
That's great advice. And folks, for you that are listening to this going, oh, I should do that. How long do we have access? We haven't figured out an exact time, but it will probably be a year from when you registered for the program. So you've got plenty of time to go through this multiple times over and over. The ones that apply most to you are the ones you need a little trigger on. So Sabryna, thank you so much. You did a great job. Obviously, we appreciate Chris, if he happens to hear this at some point, for stepping in and being willing to be recorded too. But I think hearing it in action, being applied, is so valuable, in addition to simply having it's the information application that we live in the coaching world every day. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I love my new tools.
A big thank you to both Chris and Sabryna for their willingness to provide such a genuine, authentic look at how functional mental toughness and resilience training can be integrated into a real, live coaching session about real life stuff and not just what you see on Instagram. If you have any questions related to coaching, reach out to us anytime. Results at catalystcoaching360.com. And now it's time to be a catalyst. This is Dr. Brad Cooper of Catalyst Coaching. Make it a great rest of your week, and I'll speak with you soon on another episode of the Catalyst 360 podcast, or maybe over on the YouTube coaching channel.